Hello, Hospitality 3004. Today we are going to be talking about business level strategy. Now, ideally, before you are looking at these PowerPoints, you should have watched a short video on doing a gap analysis. Now, very often the term gap analysis has has a negative connotation, okay? So it sounds as if we're looking for poor performance and seeking problem areas to fix. That's not exactly true. I mean, yes, in terms of strategic management, we are concerned with what those gaps are, and it helps us identify what our competitive strengths are for the organization. But it also shows us, where we can potentially take advantage of or create various different types of opportunities. And so essentially our gap analysis is looking at our current business level strategy and what it is that we are doing today. Now, what this is, what we want to actually be focusing on, is this correct? Oh. Now, what we actually want to be focusing on today is we want to be focusing on, okay, so these are our current situations, so our current business level strategy, and this is where we're going to be going in the future. So, and how can we get there? And there are essentially 5 questions that we look at in order to sort of make this jump and to start considering where we want to go in the future. So I'm going to discuss each of these questions individually and sort of the different ways that we investigate them and the tools that we use, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about the first question first. That makes sense. Okay, so what amount of growth and level of profitability does the organization seek? Now, here is the deal. It is not always appropriate to grow, okay? It's not always appropriate for us to be earning money. Now, I know that that sounds very strange, but let's say that you're working for government, okay? The idea is government's not really supposed to be making money, okay? Now, that's obviously debatable. But, and then of course, companies that want to become, businesses that want to maintain sort of this boutique field, they don't necessarily want to be growing a lot. So it's not that growth and sales and profits and increases is always what we want. So we want to be looking at, first and foremost, is growth appropriate, okay? And very simply, no, not all the time, okay? In some cases, what we want to do is we want to consolidate. So we want to take a couple of different company or business entities together and bring them together and kind of perfect what it is what we're doing. In some cases, we might want to be downsizing. So for instance, if a company, or I should say, if an industry is starting to fail, we might want to consider downsizing. And of course, if we're seeing a lot of success doing what we're doing, we might just want to stay as is, okay? So there are definitely plenty of times where growth is not necessarily appropriate, okay? Naturally, with small businesses, with family-owned businesses, a lot of times they want to keep control of the business, so it doesn't make sense for them to grow. If we have a business in a really mature industry, okay, so for instance, like cars, electrical products, technology, not so much technology, but I should say electrical products like toasters and irons and that sort of thing, there's only so much demand, okay? And all that they're doing is replacing existing products. So, a lot of times growth is not necessarily appropriate for them. Organizations that are in declining industries. So I think in the last lecture I had mentioned cigarettes in China. The cigarette industry is pretty much declining, certainly in Western countries, and more so in other areas as well. So that would be considered a declining industry. And then, as I already mentioned, the public sector, so obviously with government, they're not supposed to be making money off of people. Centrelink, that's not really, why they're there, is to make money. Okay, so anyway, so first we have to look at that. Is it appropriate to grow and to make money? Okay. Next, what we're doing is we're certainly looking at, is it feasible to grow? If not, we may decide to do a merger and acquisition or a strategic alliance. We talked about that previously. If it is not feasible for us to grow on our own. And then, of course, if it is feasible to grow and appropriate to grow, what products and markets are we going to do that in, and how much growth in each. So is this just going to be sort of low, average, or high growth? And again, what kinds of markets and products we're talking about. Okay, so that's the first question that we're going to be asking. All right. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is we typically look at questions 2 and 3 together, in the sense that we are looking at, what products and services do we plan to offer, and then also what customer and geographic markets do we plan to service. Now, let me just switch to the next one. There we go. Okay. Okay, so as I was saying, questions 2 and 3 are answered by this particular matrix. All right, so what we're essentially doing is we're going ahead and we're looking at the products that we presently have, or if we're going to be offering some kind of new products. And then we also look at our markets. So what are our current markets, and then what are potential new markets? We may be going into related markets, or we may be going into unrelated markets. So these are all of the things that we do need to be considering. Okay. Now, a couple of things that we need to be thinking about. One thing, if we're talking about growing in our existing product markets, we certainly do want to be looking at things like increasing the frequency of usage. Okay, now think about it like our airlines and frequent flyer miles. Think about our hotels and our loyalty rewards. Think about, going to Starbucks or Coffee Club or whatever, and after your, your 5th coffee, you get the next one free. Okay, so something like that. Also think about things like increasing the quantity used, finding new applications for current users. These are all things that we are thinking about when we are thinking about growing in our existing product market. Okay? Now, we can also go ahead and we can look at what kinds of related products can we offer into the existing market. So how are we basically going to be diversifying? Now, this may be through things like adding product features and refinements. So for instance, so you have toothpaste. Toothpaste is offered just normal toothpaste. You can have toothpaste with whitener. You can have toothpaste with various different kinds of tastes. It's the same thing for us in our industry. We offer coffee, and then we offer coffee with, mint, or coffee with, I don't know, I'm not a coffee drinker. This is not the easiest example for me. But yeah, offering all these different kinds of product features. Same things with expanding product lines. Okay, so obviously here in Australia we do have a lot of wine makers. So for instance, we could expand a product line. So we might have a winery that offers, I don't know, whatever, white wine, and they move into the sparkling wine range. Okay, so we can do that. We can develop other kinds of products. We can develop other kinds of new products for the existing market. So those are all sorts of things that we are thinking about when we're thinking about the present market, but new potential products. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is looking at bringing our existing products into related markets. This is at times a little bit difficult, but it certainly does happen because very often we do have some kind of relation between what's going on right now and other groups that we can potentially work with. So think about targeting new customer segments or expanding geographically. So certainly when our companies do, when businesses do decide to open a new product range in another area. So for instance, here in Australia, we do have Marriott's. We don't have tons of them. Ritz-Carlton is owned by Marriott. For a very long time, Ritz-Carlton was not here in Australia, but we had Marriott's here in Australia. And I think it was just last year Ritz-Carlton opened its first property here in Australia in Perth. I think it's only been about a year. So that would be an example of a existing product in a related market. Okay, and then of course we do have our new products in new markets, which can be a bit challenging, but we certainly do that. So a couple things to think about. We often consider these various different products and services that a business competes in. We often think of them as being related but different. So for instance, very often businesses have more than one set of product and services. Okay, so for instance, we were talking in my tutorial the other day about Singapore Airlines. So Singapore Airlines is one business. They're in the passenger airline industry, obviously. However, they do offer other services like freight and catering. I know they do quite a bit in terms of like pilot training and maintenance products, that sort of thing. But their primary offering is passenger flights. Okay, so this is one way that they have actually managed to expand their offerings to all of these different areas. So these are just things that we do want to think about. Okay. Question number 4 is answered with these generic strategies. I'm not going to go into these because you have several videos on cost leadership, differentiation, and then one of those videos, I think it's the first one, mentions being stuck in the middle. That's this integrated low-cost differentiation strategy. So I'm not going to bother talking about that one because you will see that in those videos. And then our final bit that we want to talk about, question number 5, is what position in the industry does the business plan to hold in the future? Now, essentially, what we need to keep in mind is, as I said before, we're looking at our gap analysis, we're figuring out what kinds of opportunities we have available to us. Now, the interesting thing is questions 1, 2, 3, and 4, they are essentially asking the question of, what is it that the organization is trying to achieve? Okay, that's really what it is that they're looking for. So we're, but in question number 5, this is really addressing the issue of where the organization wants to get by achieving these first 4 questions. So essentially, we're looking again at what kind of strategic position do we want to hold within the industry itself, okay? So do we want to be a business that, is very local, or do we want to be a business that becomes international? Do we want to be a business that is a private company? So these are all of the different aspects that we want to be considering. Industry environment, industry scope, organization type, existing organization position in terms of market position, growth position, and profitability position. So these first 4 questions answer question number 5. So do we want to be a market leader? Do we want to be the most profitable? Do we want to be the most popular? Do we want to be the one known for their service? What do we want to do? Okay, so those are the basics that you guys should be familiar with going into the rest of the material for this particular section. But if you're comfortable with these things, then you will be pretty confident and able to speak intelligently about business level strategies. So make sure you know those 5 questions and make sure that you certainly know these generic strategies because you will hear them used a lot, in the workplace, as well as, these growth and profitability levels, these product markets, and you will constantly hear your colleagues and your upper level management talking about this desired industry position. So get to know this information. It's really important that you're comfortable with it because you'll see it a ton in your professional careers. Okay, thanks so much. See you next time.